So, I know that there's a lot of talk about this smartphone, that smartphone, what platform's better. I just wanted to take a moment to take a step back. Now, for those of you who are not aware, I grew up in the 90s, and back then we had operating systems like Windows 95 and Windows 98 that were coming out of great big honkin' towers like this. Um, and for the most part, this is what we used. We didn't have the high-speed Wi-Fi that we do today. For a long time, my family was on dial-up. And for those of you who are not familiar with dial-up, do a search for, for AOL logging in or something like that, and listen to the wonderful noise that you get when you actually dial into a phone line. What they did back then was we didn't have, like I said, we didn't have wireless and we didn't have a high-speed internet. So what they did was they used something called a modem. And what the modem did was it sent an electronic signal into the phone line and dialed out to your internet service provider who provided the internet service to you. And if you tried to pick up the phone and somebody was online, well, let's just say you were in for a bit of a shock, audibly speaking. But no, we had Windows 98 systems like this big behemoth. My late father actually had a computer like this one. It was a Windows Millennium HP Pavilion N5150. Now, by today's standards, this computer would be outpaced by even the cheapest of tablets. How so? This thing had an 8 gigabyte hard drive and 64 megabytes of RAM. Now, back then, this was 14 years ago. Back then, that was state of the art. That was very top of the line. In fact, this computer has gotten a lot of use out of it. But nowadays, unfortunately, it's a paperweight. Right around the same time, right around the early 2000s, Microsoft came out with these HP Compact Pocket PCs. Then, of course, you also have Palm with Palm Pilots. These were basically handheld devices that could get you online and go and get your tasks you needed to done. There's a very important distinction to be made here about Pocket PC and about the Palm devices, and especially Pocket PC. This holds true. The way I see it, Microsoft, at least, again, this is the way I see things, but it's, if you ask me, it seems that Microsoft never targeted Pocket PC at the mass consumer. They were going after the business executive who was increasingly on the road and had to keep appointments, had to keep meetings. Anybody who had to get any real, honest-to-goodness work done was a target for the Pocket PC and for the Palm Pilot and other materials. There wasn't Facebook back then. There wasn't Twitter back then. So the broad expanse of social networking and whatnot didn't really happen. So there wasn't really a general mass market appeal for these devices. At least, again, that's the way I see it. I could be wrong. For those of you that remember instant messaging, and of course I still do it, and I'm sure many of you do too, they developed little devices like this so that, again, if you were still on dial-up and you or you had a single computer like many families and your kids were on it all the time chatting, I know I was, they developed these little handheld devices like the Zip-It Wireless or something similar that specifically took care of their instant messaging needs, and that way it would free up the family computer. Again, this was before the rise of smartphones. Fast forward, and then of course you have, I'm sorry, I forgot to add this in. Then of course you have the merge of the Pocket PC that I showed you earlier and the cell phone into the smartphone of the day, which again, the way I see it, wasn't necessarily targeted at the average everyday consumer. I'm sure there are people that have bought them, but I think the target market was primarily the enterprise business customers, which of course has always been Microsoft's bread and butter. And Windows Mobile was so popular that even Palm had conceded and started running Windows Mobile on their devices. Fast forward all the way out to 2007 forward, especially 2009, 2010. These days, you can take this big computer, everything that was in here, I'm sure, you could take something this big and cram it into something this small. Everything that this could do, and all the specs, this can do. Now, before everybody says that a smartphone can't replace a PC, let me make this very clear as a reminder. I'm not looking at modern day PCs. I'm looking at PCs that were around back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Compare a smartphone to those computers, and the smartphone runs laps around this thing 100-fold. Now sit back and think about that for a moment. We've gone from this to this. Now I'll let that sink in for a moment. Again, this to this. Has your mind been blown? Mine certainly has. What do you guys think? If you ask me, just looking back 10, 15 years, I mean, it's just, if you actually take away the OS wars and the fanboy hype and just sit down and look at the capabilities of an Android device, an Apple device, of today, of 2014, and compare that to a device from, anywhere between 96 to 2000, early 2000s, up through 2004, 2005, especially mid-90s. Really something, isn't it? What do you guys think? Thank you for watching. Comments are welcome, and have a nice day.